Thank you for joining us at the RSA Conference 2021. My name is Mayra Rosario Fuentes, and I'm going to talk to you today about Tales from the Underground, the Vulnerability Weaponization Lifecycle. So first, let's start talking about how this research came about. This research covers a year-long study in the underground market of end-day exploits offered from January 2019 through December 2020. We compared our findings with what we were seeing from our trend security detection products. We looked into over 600 underground cybercriminal forums, and due to the volatility of dark web marketplaces with exit scams and takedowns, these sites were excluded from this research. The majority of the forums were free to join, with a few asking for low membership fees. This research was focused mostly on English and Russian language forums. Other language-based forums do sell exploits, but Russian and English forums were the most robust. Some examples of popular forums included in this research were Russian language-based Exploit, WWH Club, and XSS. Examples of English language forums included Raid forums, Hack forums, Nullied, and Cracked. So what are we going to cover today? The agenda for today will cover what the underground market for end-day exploits look like, explain the life cycle of an exploit in the underground, a quick background of the types of underground exploit coders, and what the outdated exploit market looks like. Also include a section on the future of the end-day exploit market and discuss 2 life cycle samples. We researched advertisements from sales of exploits from January 2019 through December 2020. We tried to filter out advertisements we think are scammers or had a low reputation, but that is not an exact science. We also looked at what cybercriminals were requesting to purchase, sort of like a wish list of exploits. Microsoft products made up 47% of all requested CVEs in the underground, while IoT only made up 5%. The increased bandwidth of connected devices with the new 5G entering the market, IoT devices will become more vulnerable to cyber attacks. The average price people listed that were willing to pay was $2,000. 52% of exploits requested were also less than 2 years old. We also saw some users willing to pay up to $10,000 for a 0-day exploit targeting Microsoft products. Here we have 2 examples of requested exploits. The top graphic is an English language forum for the CVE 2019-1151. This CVE is a remote code execution vulnerability that exists when the Windows font library improperly handles specifically crafted embedded fonts. The bottom graphic is from a Russian language forum. The user is looking for assistance with an Apache web server vulnerability and is willing to pay up to $2,000 for help with finding a payload. This is probably someone who's going to turn this into a bug bounty program. So the most popular advertised exploits in the last 2 years were for Microsoft Office, Microsoft Windows, Internet Explorer, and Microsoft Remote Desktop Protocol, with 61% of the market share. The most advertised end days in English forums was from 2017, while Russian forums were mostly 1-day-old exploits. Russian forums had a more variety of exploits for sale, unlike English forums that often advertise Microsoft Office and Adobe PDFs. Russian language forums were more professionally run than in English forums. Affordable end-day exploits for sale in Russian language forums included a Microsoft Remote Desktop Protocol for $200, a WinRAR exploit for $300, and Cisco exploits starting from $1,000. And in English forum, Microsoft Word and Excel exploits can start as low as $35. We also found 54% of the exploits offered for sale were less than 2 years old. We took into a deeper look into what cybercriminals' wish list versus sold market for Microsoft products look like. We noticed what was requested was very similar to what the market was offering. cyber criminals may have seen the requested items from users before deciding what exploits to offer in the market. Word and Excel, both in wishlist and sold market, dominated. These are two sales advertisements for end days from Russian language forums. The graphic on the left, the sellers advertising a bundle of exploits from 2020 from $6,000 and up. The graphic on the right, the sellers advertising the CVE from 2018 and 2020 for $1,000. CVE 2018-0296 and CVE 2020-3452 are vulnerabilities in the web interface of the Cisco Adaptive Security Appliance that could allow an unauthorized remote attacker. Here's a typical life cycle of an exploit in the underground. It starts with the vulnerability being developed by the hacker. The capability is then weaponized by cyber criminals and kept secret. A 0 day is offered for sale in the underground. The vulnerability is either sold to a bug bounty or discovered by a researcher or sold to a third-party vendor. Next, the vendor becomes aware of this vulnerability. Patch is created and released. Cyber criminals will either stop selling the exploit or the cyber criminal will continue to sell the patch exploit now at a discount that is no longer a 0 day. Cyber criminals can continue selling this exploit 2 years and beyond at a lower price. Or some criminals will begin to bundle up these outdated exploits to make more profits. Then finally, when the exploit's no longer profitable, the cyber criminal will stop selling this in the underground. Most of these are no longer sold because it's either due to a new release of the product being used or the exploit's too well known and patched. These two pictures are two actors that have been selling exploits for more than 3 years in the underground. Most of these experienced sellers sell only a handful of exploits a year, since the prices start ranging from $10,000 up to $500,000. These sellers have a high reputation in the underground, or are sometimes called out by name in the forum when users are looking for a specific exploit. We saw forum users discuss multiple bounty programs and the negatives and positives of submitting to them. While the majority were pleased with their experiences, there was a handful that were disgruntled with them. Some forum users complained about the long wait times for submission replies or not receiving the bounty amount they had expected. Some forum users discussed maxing out bounty program submissions allowed for the year and were looking into selling the remaining exploits in the underground. Some bounty sellers asked for assistance to complete a submission by offering money. We did see a few advertisements where some of these people that submit to bounty programs actually added their resume of the types of bounties that had been paid out in order to get people to buy their services. In our research, we also found exploit brokers in the underground. These brokers offered to buy exploits for cash and then turn around and submit them to bounty programs. Some offered high payouts for finding 0 days, while many did not advertise the potential payouts. The graphic on the top is from a Russian language forum. The advertisement is a private company that is looking for 0 day vulnerabilities and lists their wish list of exploits with the version numbers of certain products. While the bottom graphic is an exploit broker from a Russian language forum looking for Internet Explorer 0 days, and he's willing to pay up to $1,000 per exploit. Some cyber criminals in English forums are selling exploit builders for a monthly fee. Exploits are constantly updated according to these advertisements to avoid detection. Prices can range from $60 up to $2,000 a month. Some of these subscription services offer exploits that are over 3 years old, so bundling them can demand higher prices than selling them individually. The graphic on the left is an example of an exploit builder subscription service from an English language forum. Prices from this seller range from $60 to $120 for 3 days, for 3 months. We also looked at the distribution of these exploits offered in these bundles. And we saw that the majority of the bundles offered are 29% from 2019. These two are more examples of subscription-based services. The one on the left is from an English language forum offering CVEs as old as 2014 for Microsoft Word. The graphic on the right is an advertisement for another English language forum. The sellers offering CVEs from 2017 and 2018 for 1,150 to exploit Microsoft Word products. One of the specific ones, CVE 2017-11882, is actually a 17-year-old memory corruption issue in Microsoft Office. When exploited successfully, it can let attackers execute remote code on a vulnerable machine. This specific CVE was used by Loki InfoSealer banking malware. Cyber criminals will use the cheapest tool to get the job done. In most cases, that does not require a 0-day or recently released vulnerability, and instead turn to more than 10 years old vulnerabilities. For instance, WannaCry relied on MS17-010 or the external blue vulnerability, for which a patch was already available before the outbreak of WannaCry. Yet, almost 4 years later, using Shodan, which is a search engine for internet-connected devices, we discovered over 668,000 devices were still not patched and vulnerable to WannaCry. Just recently, in February 2021, we started to see an increase on WannaCry. The oldest vulnerabilities discovered by our detection systems was from 1999. CVEs as old as 2015 are still being used for ransomware and malware toolkits exploits in 2021. Comparing our trend detection systems, what we're seeing in the underground, we saw 22% of exploits sold in the underground were 3 years and older. Exploits that have been patched for years are cheap to find in the underground. English forum users often ask for old exploits or with help implementing an outdated exploit. In 2020, we investigated an actor selling an exploit that targeted Excel versions from 2007 and was offering an exploit from $15 and up. In an English language forum, we saw a bundle of exploits from 2010 selling for $800. So outdated exploits in the underground. So here we saw requested exploits from 2014, and this included CVE 2015-6639. The oldest CVE sold in the underground included CVE 2012-0158 and CVE 2016-5195, known as Dirty Cow. CVE 2012-0158 has been used in ransomware in 2020, targeting a hospital. CVE 2017-11882 was listed as the top 10 CVE exploit by the FBI in 2020. CVE 2016-5195, Dirty Cow. We saw this offered in the underground for $3,000. And we saw this in Exodus Spyware and Outlaw Hacking Group using this exploit. So the future of the exploit market. The market for 0-day exploits used to be a lucrative market, but in the last 2 years, we've seen a decline in advertisements in the underground. Bounty programs are still more lucrative than ever, but bounty programs have increased payouts, making the black market for 0 days to be scarcer. And with dark web market volatility, the lack of trust lately, the underground exploit market is changing. So we believe the future of exploit market is access as a service. Access as a service has become the new hot commodity in the underground market. Many sellers mention specifically which exploit or CVE was used to compromise the business entity. Access as a service is also more lucrative as it can demand higher prices than end days and does not require as much scrutiny from forum users like exploit sellers usually receive for potential buyers. There are two types of sellers of access as a service, the more professional ones and the script kiddie types. The script kiddie types are sellers that don't dedicate all their time to access as a service and just happen to get lucky finding an exploit that worked, while forums like Exploit are professional sellers whose complete portfolio is mostly access as a service and have a wide variety of businesses available for sale. The top graphic is from a Russian language forum. The sellers offering email servers from $2,000 and up. And this specific seller is saying you can use this to do business email compromise attacks. The graphic on the bottom is from an English language forum. The seller is offering access to two banks starting from $1,200. The seller advertises they use a remote code vulnerability to access this business. So next, we're going to discuss two case studies of what a life cycle of a vulnerability looks like in the underground. The first one is CVE 2020-9054. So this is Zyxel and firewall products are affected by a remote execution vulnerability. Users are advertised to install the standard firmware patches or follow the workaround immediately for optimal protection. So this specific one starts off with February 2020 being sold in the underground by an actor on XXS, a Russian language forum, starting from $20,000. A security researcher discovered this vulnerability and writes about it in February. Then in March, the CV is published, publicly disclosed, and patched. Shortly after, we see a new Mariah variant called Makishi seen in the wild. A month later, we're starting to see our customers targeted, and we're starting to see hits on our trend systems. Then in May, now it's been 2 months since this was first discovered, the actor, ARMF, started selling this exploit now at a discount. Instead of $20,000, he started selling it at $10,000. Then in August 2020, another actor called Quote started requesting the CVE and was willing to pay up to $2,000 for someone who could sell him this exploit. The next one is CVE 2016-5195. So this is known as the Dirty Cow exploit. It's a kernel vulnerability that allows any privileged existing user to escalate its privilege group. What is the highest privilege on any Unix or Linux system, which has access to all the files? The vulnerability is known as a privilege explanation, or COW, change on write. And this is a technique used by Linux to reduce duplication of memory objects. So an example of this vulnerability is 4 years. It started in November 2016 when the vulnerability was publicly disclosed. The following year, in September 2017, we started to see first Android malware targeting the CVE. A year later, we're seeing in hack forum users asking for help how to implement this. February 2019, we see an actor from the Russian forum exploit selling this exploit for $3,000. In April, we start to see this exploit being used for Exodus spyware. Then in February 2020, we started to see the outlaw crypto mining group using this exploit. And still in May 2020, we started to see another user asking for assistance on how to implement this CVE. So this CVE is actually still active in the underground and it hasn't died. It's still being sold and traded. So the next step moving forward, the COVID-19 pandemic has caused massive disruptions on how individuals and enterprises operate on a day-to-day basis. At a time when remote work has become essential, the COVID-19 pandemic has seen a large increase in remote working, but also a significant increase in attack services. Malicious actors have grown both in number and sophistication and are looking to exploit weak security among people working from home and at work, making it more important to find and fix vulnerabilities that can be used as part of an attack. An average organization, for instance, reportedly takes about 50 days to patch a critical vulnerability in its application. So you can't possibly patch all CVEs each year. So we recommend in patching plans, factor in what exploit criminals wish to use and can buy and not simply by severity. Underground actors sold and requested more Adobe and Microsoft exploits in the last 2 years. It's simply unrealistic to prevent all vulnerabilities from getting access to your system. However, virtual patching will help buy additional time for security systems to patch these necessary updates. Virtual patching also provides an additional layer of security when patches are no longer available, no longer issued for legacy and at the end of support software. Over time, the price of the vulnerability drops all the way down to zero. After Patch Tuesday, exploits price began to drop as they're now end days. This makes the exploits accessible to more cybercriminals as months pass. At each stage your attack surface grows as more and more attackers incorporate it. The longevity of a valuable exploit is longer than most expected. Patching yesterday's popular vulnerability can be more important than today's critical one. Thank you for your time today, and I hope this session was useful and you enjoyed it. Thanks.